Tighten up my meat.
This is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. Trust me, I'm like a smart person. I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius. I had the best words. Tolerated. I know words. Mike Pounds. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation. But there's no better word than stupid. And anomalous, really anomalous. I'm very highly educated. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. I had the best words. God bless the United States.
Around the nation, TYT Nation, welcome to the show. It's Monday. We're back. Yes, had a little bit of a long break here. So, yeah, funny story. Actually, not funny. I threw my back up. So, yeah, that's what happened. But I'm back. I feel better. And so we're going to do a show. So I do apologize to everybody for missing out in the last couple of days of insanity. But it was a good time to sit back, relax, take a break, throw on a heating pad, and try to forget the disaster that is, of course, Donald Trump and our political system. But nonetheless, we're back. We're going to be talking about a lot of that stuff, including Donald Trump's interview on Fox News with Chris Wallace. There's so many good parts of that interview, so we're going to be breaking down quite a bit of that. But then we're also going to talk about service workers that are these are essential workers, right? That are being attacked by anti-maskers. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about John Kasich. So apparently John Kasich is the newest member of the resistance. So, joy. We've got another Republican. Yeah, so I got some thoughts about that. All right. But anyway, so that's the show. We're going to have some fun. We're going to start with some ridiculousness with Donald Trump and his claims about COVID-19. But before we dive into that, please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Again, it helps the show out greatly if you share it around. Share it like the Rona, except without the dying or the getting sick. So I do wish the show would spread as fast online as the coronavirus does in real life. But unfortunately, the YouTube algorithm is kind of against us when it comes to that. But anyway, let's start out with Dr. Dumb.
I don't know, and I don't think he knows. I don't think anybody knows with this. This is a very tricky deal. Everybody thought the summer it would go away and it would come back in the fall. Well, in the summer it came. They used to say the heat was good for it, and it really knocks it out, remember? And then it might come back in the fall. So they got that one wrong. They got a lot wrong. They got a lot wrong. The World Health got a tremendous amount wrong.
That was Donald Trump repeating one of the many falsehoods during his Fox News interview with Chris Wallace on Sunday. So that drew, of course, a lot of criticism from medical professionals because he's just straight up basically lying. Dude, they all got it wrong. The World Health Organization, they got it wrong. Dr. Fauci, he got it wrong. Hey, you know who else was saying that coronavirus was going to disappear by the summertime? Again, it is basically getting close to the end of July, right? And coronavirus is still here. In fact, it's actually worse than it was before. When he originally said that, oh, it's gonna be gone by the summer. Well, it's not gone. It's worse. You idiot! You bungled it 100% completely. And now he's saying a lot of people got it wrong. Everybody else got it wrong, but I was getting it right, even though I admit later that I kind of did get it wrong. But everybody got it wrong. No, not everybody got it wrong. You got it wrong. In fact, you got it wrong when you said dumb stuff like this.
It's one person coming in from China, and we have it under control. It's going to be just fine. When you have 15 people, and the 15 within a couple of days is going to be down to close to zero, that's a pretty good job we've done. I think we're going to be very good with the coronavirus. I think that at some point that's going to sort of just disappear, I hope.
All that, by the way, is what Chris Wallace's crew put together for that interview. So, look, good job, Chris Wallace, I guess, for calling him out on that stuff. That whole interview, again, pure cringe from the president, and then Chris Wallace basically debunking his garbage. So now, speaking of debunking, we're going to go to some actual medical professionals, people that are not in, the news industry, or any part of Donald Trump's administration as well, to talk about how Trump's handled this and some of his egregious claims. For example, one of the claims was that the United States mortality rate is the lowest in the world. It's the lowest in the world. We have the great mortality. No, not true. Speaking to Dr. Rochelle Walensky, Chief Division of Infectious Diseases from Massachusetts General Hospital, she explained why Donald Trump's wrong. Quote, you can measure given a patient had the disease, what's the chance they would have passed? As in, not passed the disease, but had passed away. Now, she says the United States ranks about 7th in that measure, in that metric. 3% of people with with the disease in the United States had passed away from COVID-19. Now, I'm seeing this ridiculous stat from conservatives, from people who don't believe this, saying that, oh, no, this virus has a 99.7% mortality rate. I'm sorry, not mortality rate, survival rate. Wow, that would be really, really bad, wouldn't it? That would be horrifying. But no, they're saying that, oh, no, most of the people, 99.9% or 99.7% of people who contract the virus, they survive. It's a great survivability rate. So I don't know why you're all freaking out. In reality, it's, again, the official numbers are about 3%, which, again, leads to the conspiracy theories about them cooking the numbers, right? Oh, no, they're making this up. They're cooking the books. I don't know why I'm doing that in the Trump voice. But, again, it's what I hear. Oh, the guy dies of a heart attack. Well, then you write it down as COVID-19. Again, that's not true. COVID-19 is not necessarily a cause of death. It causes all sorts of different complications in patients. Organ failure. I mean, look, there's some of the reason why people who survive COVID-19 end up having heart problems for the rest of their lives, or at least that's what we're looking, heart problems afterwards, certainly after survival, lung problems, other organs that have been damaged during that time. And so, I mean, look, there's, again, a lot of the virus that we don't necessarily know what the long-term impacts are going to be. But from the survivors, not everything is all well and good. And so there's something that we have to look at. But going back to the 3% mortality rate, that is far larger than just the flu or the common cold that they always tend to cite when they're trying to open the eyes of the sheep, right? So now she also pointed out another way to look at this and asked what the number of people per 100,000, that's per capita, who passed in the United States compared to other countries. On that metric, the United States is third behind the UK and Mexico. So we're behind Mexico. Say, hey, all you Mexico haters on the conservative side want to build a wall, right? Well, now it's Mexico that wants to build a wall to keep Americans out because of our insane death rates in America, okay, and insane infection rates as well. Again, we're pretty much the leaders in the world, pretty close to it anyway. Now, on that metric, again, per capita, we're also behind, let's see, we're behind the UK, again, behind Mexico. And so she says the tragic thing is that our numbers are rising because our cases are going up exponentially in comparison to the UK, where they've actually flattened the curve. Their cases are lower and flatter. And unfortunately, she says, I think we're going to surpass the UK in the number of deaths per capita in the United States. So that's a disaster. But there's more. So now on CNN, Wolf Blitzer had on another medical professional here that's basically talked about this as well, the mortality rate. He said this: we know there's a lag between tests going up and mortality rate following. Is it fair to grade the U.S. handling of the coronavirus and the mortality rate when we've also heard so many reports of lasting and debilitating symptoms from the virus? Even a lot of people who don't die are ill for months and months and may have long-term ramifications down the road. Now, before I get to the response from the person that he had on, I do want to mention, and this isn't talked about enough too, the financial costs of this virus. And look, independent media, we talk about that here because we try to give you all the perspectives. We try to give you all the information as much as we can. And I'm not saying that, there are places that are omitting this, that aren't really talking about it. But at the same time, you've got channels like MSNBC that are the establishment, CNN that are, again, the establishment. When you talk about the insane medical bills that survivors of coronavirus are getting, into the tens, hundreds, thousands, even, some cases, some people have had a bill over $1 million in medical costs. Well, they don't like to really talk about that as much because, it really makes the case for a single payer healthcare system where in other countries, for example, South Korea, they don't have insane medical bills like this because they have a universal healthcare system that covers every man, woman, and child that is paid for through taxation, no premiums, no deductibles, no out-of-pocket costs. And so, again, when your channel is, or I should say when your network is funded by health insurance companies partly, well, you tend to avoid that topic. That said, right? So we talk about that. And that is a major, major problem. So now getting to the professional he had on, this is Dr. Jeremy Faust, a physician at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. Here's what he said. It's absolutely right, Wolf, and I think our report card is good on any, I don't think our report card is any good on any particular metric. The mortality rate, we ought to be first. We are the country that led the way on some vaccines, has done better than anyone else on cancer. We ought to be first, but in this particular crisis, we're not first on anything. Mortality rate, testing capacity, we ought to be disturbed by that fact and start to own up to it. The world is not looking at us to us right now for leadership, and usually they do on issues when it comes to medical science. There are a lot of ways to look at this, and a lot of ways we have room for improvement. Look, the world is not looking to us for leadership. The world is looking at us like a pariah. Again, we're not able to travel to the Bahamas now. There are so many countries that are looking at American tourists and American citizens going over whether it be for a vacation or a business trip and saying, no, you can't do that. We're not going to allow you. We'll allow people from the EU. We'll allow people from Canada. But if you're from the United States of America, you're banned. We're going to ban you from entry because your numbers are so out of control. That's the effect of having Donald Trump as president and having our political process be driven not by intellectuals, but by people with an ideological agenda. In this case, that agenda is anti-science, anti-intellectual. And so, in fact, it's not just anti. They go out of their way to try to destroy academia and the sciences in favor of, again, in a lot of cases, religiosity. And so that's what we're facing in this country. And so when people don't believe in science and people don't trust the scientists and people don't trust, in some cases, in a lot of cases, the media, which is just trying to disseminate the facts, from the scientists and even has scientists on, they don't believe it. It's fake news to them because there's no trust in these institutions. It's a disaster. But now onto his statements itself. He's basically saying it very politely that we fucked up. The entire response by the federal government to this pandemic can be described as a gigantic debacle. I mean, it's an absolute disaster, and we know this. Look, just looking at the financial stuff, we've had very little relief for regular people, right? So in a pandemic, you want people to stay home. We have a political party that's actively saying, no, we don't want to incentivize people to stay home. We want to incentivize them to go out without masks and without doing physical or social distancing and to continue to consume, to buy, to go to those bars, to go to those movie theaters, to go and do things regularly, to put your kids back in school when we don't have a control over this pandemic. Again, there are some countries that have successfully been able to navigate this virus without having to lock down their economy. Unfortunately, well, America's not one of them because we will not, as a society, apparently we're too individualistic to mask up and to do that physical distancing. They're doing way better in Japan, and they didn't have to lock down because they followed those guidelines, because they put their community over their own personal discomfort. And that's something that we can't do here in America. So unfortunately, we're probably going to have to lock down. And if we had any sort of competent administration in place, that's exactly what we would be doing. And we would be able to give people the support they need to be able to survive a lockdown in the form of a UBI, a temporary UBI, and certain benefits. But, as well as, canceling rent for the duration. But we're not going to do that. Instead, we had massive relief for corporations, and we've got people spreading mis and disinformation everywhere. That's a recipe for disaster. And the fish rots from the head down, and it's because, again, the people with the money and the people with the power, they want the country open. They want to get back to business. They want to get back to making money. And in some ways, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you start putting lives over, everything else, when you start putting money over lives and over people, instead of putting lives first, well, then that's where there's a problem. Okay. And as far as Donald Trump's concerned, this is inconvenient for him because he was running on how good supposedly the economy was and how smart and competent of a leader he is. And that's just not true. It's just not shaking out. So he's just going to continue, though, to lie and gaslight the people, as you've seen here in this clip, and as you're going to see later on. All right. Moving on, let's get into some cognitive testing. This should be fun.
That's all misrepresentation.
Well, that's what it was on the web.
It's all misrepresentation. Because, yes, the first few questions are easy, but I'll bet you couldn't even answer the last 5 questions. I'll bet you couldn't. They get very hard, the last 5 questions.
Well, one of them was count back from 100 by 7.
And let me tell you, You couldn't answer. You couldn't answer.
All right, what's the question?
Many of the questions. I'd get you the test. I'd like to give it, but I guarantee you that Joe Biden could not answer those questions.
Okay.
So that was Donald Trump once again flexing his mental prowess by bragging that he can pass a cognitive test, while Joe Biden, of course, not. Now, the whole purpose of the cognitive test is to make sure that your brain actually works, that it's not melting and coming out your ears. Well, congratulations, Donald Trump. You just proved that you passed the test, that your brain is not melting and coming out your ears. Wow, what an achievement. Congratulations. I love that in his original brag, because this is like a double down, or maybe even a triple down, where he's like, yeah, the doctors were so surprised that I could pass the test. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, we have listened to you talk. So, yeah, I guess it is kind of surprising that your brain is intact and not mush. But anyway, so let me first preface this by admitting on the Joe Biden part, right, that I was concerned about Joe Biden. And let's be honest about that, right? Joe Biden's not as sharp as he used to be. And that does happen in old age. He sometimes gets confused and forgets what he's saying, loses track, all that stuff. And again, that is explainable with him kind of losing his edge in his older age. There's nothing wrong with pointing that out, right? That said, I think he would pass this test. He's not nearly as gone as Donald Trump claims. I'm just saying, I think he would, yes, he could point to an elephant and say that that's an elephant. The same as Donald Trump. But nonetheless, you heard him. He said those last 5 questions, they were tough. So Joe Biden can't answer those questions. Okay, so let me show you what those last 5 questions were. I mean, you can clearly see that the naming portion of it was, hey, it's the lion. What is this animal? That appears to be a baby fake newsosaurus. Very sad. It's a very sad fake news. No, just kidding. Okay. So very, very simple questions in this. I mean, because the whole point of the test, the cognition test, is not to score high. It's not like you're asking, physics questions, right? Or calculus. It's, again, to make sure that your brain is functional. If you can't pass this test, then it would show that you're mentally unfit to serve as president of the United States. Again, that's the whole point. So, again, I'm pretty sure that both candidates would pass the test, but only Donald Trump would be the one that brags about it. I mean, it's insane. Again, with Biden, Biden has trouble with his words, some difficulty remembering where he's going with a specific train of thought. Again, we all get derailed, right? And so I can forgive that, right? I can't just point to that and go, no, severe mental decline. I can say again that he's lost his edge. Again, that's what happens when you get a little bit older. You don't remember as well. You don't have as much energy. Stuff like that happens, right? But Donald Trump, I also can't say that. And yes, he spouts verbal diarrhea and constantly contradicts himself. And my God, the lying, but none of which are cognitive impairments. Though I am quite sure that Donald Trump has some possibly emotional impairments. I think the guy's a sociopath that believes empathy is weakness. And a lot of that, according to Mary Trump, goes back to the way his father had treated him when he was growing up. And so I think he's an emotionally stunted man-child. That said, the internet decided they were going to have a field test. Field day. Again, me losing my concentration. With one person saying, my mom lived in a nursing home before her death after suffering a couple strokes, which would be multiple strokes. She was given this test regularly during neurological appointments. The nurse always praised her performance, no matter how she did. You were not given this test for no reason. Oh, that's devastating. That is devastating. One person says, wow, he was right. The final questions are hard. Someone needs to inform him these tests are to see if someone is deteriorating upstairs. If it was all mechanical engineering and chemistry questions, most of the world would have cognitive problems. That's, to be fair, Another person adds, well, to his credit, the first 30 questions are animal pictures in second grade math. But the last 5 questions obviously cover advanced calculus, quantum physics, and a bonus essay question on his knowledge of the study of dark matter, which I have no doubt he aced, as he claims. The dark matter, it's the darkest matter in relation to the rest of matter. In the context of matter and darkness, it is very dark, tremendously dark. Let me tell you, believe me. Another person says, my favorite part of the Chris Wallace interview is Donald not remembering any of the hard questions in the cognitive test he supposedly aced. Oh, I love it. Another person says, your father, this is to Don Jr., I'm sorry, not Don Jr., Eric Trump. It's hard to tell those two apart. Your father brags about passing his cognitive test, but found the last 5 questions very hard. Did he have trouble deciding which was the elephant and which was the donkey? Another one says, the pitiful part of this is Trump claiming that the test is hard, which, again, obviously it's not, is that Trump truly believes the test is hard. What's more, his followers are going to willfully dumb themselves down to his level to make it feel true. It's like militant denial. They've weaponized vapidity into an asset. Most of that I agree with, actually. I don't really know if Donald Trump believes that the test was hard. I think Donald Trump is doing the Donald Trump thing of basically hyping something up that is super simple and easy to do in order to make himself look better. It's the art of puffery, right? You puff yourselves up to make yourself seem like awesome and amazing. And that's just something that he's been doing for his entire life. And so the guy could like take a shit and be like, this is the greatest shit that has ever been taken. Very tremendous, very large and bulbous, very snake-like. Tremendous. I must have a tremendous diet, and it shows. Like, it's just one of those things where he brags about things that you shouldn't really brag about. So going back to the puffery and bragging about this ridiculous, not ridiculous test, but ridiculously bragging about passing a cognitive test, which again just shows whether or not you have neurological damage. It's so ridiculous. All right. One more here. One person, Jennifer Henry, says that he talks about this test as embarrassing, and this is a listicle. That he insists he aced it is absurd. Again, 100%. That he suggests others may find it hard is embarrassing. That he found the last 5 questions really difficult is telling. There are only 10 questions. It's not 35 questions long. 10 questions. Devastating. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he is in decline. I don't know, man. Maybe it's not just an ego issue after all. I don't know. As one user pointed out, they don't give you this test for no reason. So now we go from insane to dangerous. Now, President Donald Trump has refused to say if he would accept the results of the 2020 presidential election. Take a look.
Are you suggesting that you might not accept the results of the election?
I have to say, look, Hillary Clinton asked me the same thing.
No, I asked you the same thing in the debate.
Are you saying you're not prepared now to commit to that principle?
What I'm saying is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
Well,
okay?
Chris.
And you know what? She's the one that never accepted it.
I agree.
She never accepted her loss, and
But
she looks like
can
a
you
fool.
can you give a direct answer? You will accept the
I
election?
have to see. Look, I have to see. No, I'm not going to just say yes. I'm not going to say no, and I didn't last time either.
Whether it's in 2021 or 2025, how will you regard your years as president?
All right, so, I wonder if he'll accept it. Well, maybe if he wins. I think that would be the only realistic situation where he would accept the results of the election. Now, to be fair, they threw in a part about Hillary, and actually he was right. I mean, Hillary Clinton since 2016, just as a side note, has been talking about the Russians for like the last 4 years. Like, no, it's the Russians, it's James Comey, it's the Bernie bros. They all conspired to steal the election from me. No, you won. You technically won by 3 million votes. You just didn't win the Electoral College, which shouldn't exist anyway because it's a remnant from slave owners, from the time of slave owners. So, in slavery. So, no, actually, in all, well and good, without the, Russiagate or anything like that, no, Hillary Clinton probably would have won. Absolutely, actually would have won because she got more votes if we had a different electoral system. We do not. We should probably change that to where more votes actually does win. But we would actually have to have people advocating for that. Is Hillary Clinton out there advocating for getting rid of the Electoral College? If she is, all credit to her. But I'm only really seeing leftists, the same Bernie bros that they went after, quote unquote Bernie bro, back in 2016 and also in 2018, 2019, and all that. They're the only ones that seem to be calling for the abolition of the Electoral College. Weird. Where's the establishment in this? Very strange. Very strange. But anyway, so let's get to, like I said, whether or not Donald Trump will accept the election results. Yeah, he will if he wins. That said, to be fair, he kind of didn't even accept it when he wins, when he won, because he lost the popular vote. That's why he was claiming, there's so much fraud. They're busing in Mexicans to the polling places. The Democrats are, lots of fraud, voter fraud, fake news, etc. And I actually won the popular vote. No, you didn't. Take the win where you got it in the Electoral College. You happen to outdo Hillary Clinton in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin because Hillary Clinton did not spend any time in those states and did not have an operation in those states to get out the vote. That was her fault. It wasn't you. Okay, you didn't do that. It was her election to lose, and she absolutely blew it. She blew it. Now, that said, those 3 states, plus more, are states that Donald Trump is not doing well in. In fact, according to a Change Research CNBC poll released this week, Joe Biden is leading in Michigan 48-42, about 6 points. In Pennsylvania, the poll showed Biden ahead 50-42, 8 points. And Biden winning in Wisconsin 48-42, again, another 6-point lead. It gets worse. In Florida, Real Clear Politics has Biden beating Trump by about 5.2%. Not good. In Arizona, by the way, Biden is also in the lead, but by closer margin. He's only leading by about 2 points. So now Donald Trump goes back and he calls this all fake polls, right? It's the fake polls by the fake news media. They got it wrong in 2016. Fox News has been very, very unkind to me when it comes to polls. No, look, if the trend holds, and it's very likely that it will, since, look, we're at the end of July, we're almost in August, and then you've got October, November. It's getting real close in here, right? And yes, of course, anything can change in 4 months. I get that. But right now, a lot of people, what's forefront on a lot of people's mind is coronavirus. And not only that, but you also have Black Lives Matter and those protests and the federal basically overreach. I mean, the feds are literally taking people off the street in unmarked vans. Hey, right-wingers, if there was any situation where you would want to rise up against a tyrannical government for plucking people off the street, well, now would be the time to do it. Oh, wait, no, it's because it's your guy. You agree with him. So it's funny how it's basically fascism is in vogue, and you can't wait to choke down that boot. Funny how that works. Anyway, so look, let's go back to again the polls, right? So look, there's a lot of people talking, and I even fell into the trap, and I admit that, right? Where I was like, oh, the polls were massively off. Actually, when you look at it, they weren't that far off, really. The problem is that you had Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump that were very, very close in polling, about a 2 to 3 point spread in a lot of places. And so they didn't show this massive thing. In fact, that there was a big problem in the Hillary Clinton camp where, and you know, it goes back to what, I mean, when she would say dumb things like, why am I not 50 points ahead? Well, that's because of you. I mean, Hillary Clinton's the face of the establishment. Donald Trump was running a somewhat populist campaign, at least when it comes to trade. And not only that, but Hillary Clinton was considered a pretty unlikable person. Likability plays a huge part in elections. I know, who knew, right? And so I think a part of that is, of course, sexism that can be explained. I mean, I remember Emma Vigeland, for example, interviewing people saying that, oh, no, I'd never vote for a woman president. Women belong in the kitchen. Literally, that's stuff that they said. So, and that attitude is prevalent, especially amongst some of the older generation. And so there is that, right? And that's fairly self-explanatory. Not only that, but the Clinton plan to target suburban Republicans has failed. Those same Republicans now are, ironically, anti-Trump. These are people like the Lincoln Project, who are now being showered by resistance liberal cash and are being welcomed in the Democratic Party. So that's a big problem here. Man, that is a huge problem. But on to the main point here. You just had the president of the United States saying that I'm not going to accept the election results. How insane is that? And I know his main reason, well, the voting by mail, it's the biggest fraud in the world. No, it's not. Vote by mail is not filled with fraud. I know there are states that do this, that have been doing this for quite some time, have very, very low levels of fraud. I've given the details in previous videos how it's actually secure and actually a great way to vote, especially considering now we have a pandemic, now we have coronavirus, and the fact that Donald Trump himself and his staff have also voted by mail. The only reason to oppose it is because it will end up hurting you electorally. And you know it already. And so that goes back to, of course, Paul Weyrich, right? You guys remember the video, Goo Goo Syndrome, right? Where Paul Weyrich, godfather of the modern conservative movement, said that basically the more people vote, the less Republicans win. The more Democrats win. So guess what? Our solution is not to reach out and be a better party and represent the working class, represent the people. No, we're just going to try to restrict the vote. Okay. Well, I mean, if that's what you're going to do, and by the way, that is what they have been doing, along with the Southern strategy of appealing to Southern racists, former Dixiecrats, former Democrats when they had the party switch. Republicans always love to bring up the fact that the KKK was racist and they were Democrats. Yeah, and then in the 1960s there was a party switch. And then now, where did all those racists go? Oh, they went to the Republican Party. They've been using that Southern strategy combined with voter suppression of black people and other minorities. And there you go. That's been their strategy. And Donald Trump continues this strategy because voting by mail would actually make it easier for people to vote, for more people to vote. And so not only that, right? They've been pushing this voter fraud narrative for years, right? Not going so far as to accuse the sitting president of not being a legitimate president for at least that reason, but they had other reasons. For example, Obama, not a citizen, wasn't born here in this country. Oh, where's the birth certificate, Donald? You said you had investigators in Hawaii. Where are they? Where is it? Where's the real birth certificate? Oh, right. That doesn't exist because Obama already showed his real birth certificate, long form and everything. And guess what? He is a legitimate president. Far more than somebody like Donald Trump. But like now, here's the irony, right? Donald Trump is actually the second president to not actually win the majority of the votes. And if we actually lived in a democracy where, the person who gets the most votes wins, well, Donald Trump wouldn't be president. George W. Bush would have never been president either. In reality, Al Gore would have won the election in 2000. It would have changed the course of, I believe, of history. But it didn't go in that direction. But not accepting the results, Donald Trump is basically showing you that he doesn't believe in our electoral system, which is not good because our system only relies on the faith the public puts into it. And when you have the president of the United States saying, don't trust our electoral system, well, that's really bad. It takes us down a very, very dark road, which inevitably leads to fascist authoritarianism. We don't want to go that direction. All right. I'm going to take a quick break. Don't worry, we'll come back. We've got people in the service industry facing anti-maskers, and that's, of course, disastrous numbers on that. And then we've got Jen Kasich. So, new resistance hero, or is he? Stay right here. Be right back. Around the Nation.
Tighten up my knee.
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
Oh, wow, I'm sorry.
Welcome back to the show, Around the Nation, right here. TYT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you. All right, so first, I want to thank some patrons and some channel members for the day. First, patrons, I want to thank Margaret Cahu and Arturo Villaluz. Thank you, by the way, to those patrons. Patreon.com/TYT Nation, that's how you can support us. And then channel members, Martin Rainin and Jesse Warren. Thank you, and thank you to all the new ones that are joined today, CMT63 and Mad Hat 964. Thank you. Super chat here from Adrian Benningfield says, I'm glad you're well. Thank you. Thank you. I do appreciate that. I appreciate all the well wishes and things like that. This is every once in a while. You bend the wrong way. I jacked my back up when I was in my mid-20s, and it's been occasionally bothering me ever since. It just seize up a couple of days, bed rest and back to normal, back to good. But thank you for caring. I appreciate that. All right. Let's get into the rest of the show. A new survey shows an alarming number of service workers being assaulted on the job by people who refuse to follow mask guidelines. So now this comes from a survey of employers from the Service Employees International Union. And they talked to about 4,187 McDonald's workers. And they talked, and the union shared this with Business Insider. And they found in the survey that about 44% of respondents said they had been verbally or physically assaulted after confronting customers who were not wearing masks, these anti-maskers, right? So in a lot of states, especially when seeing huge increases in coronavirus cases, you've got governors or mayors of cities that are implementing mask guidelines. In some cases, businesses have to have mandatory masks in order to enter a business, or they do leave it up to the discretion of the business, which in a lot of cases for these big corporations, Walmart's the latest example, saying that we require that all of our customers wear a mask inside the store. So now in places where there isn't, of course, as I said, those companies set those policies and they expect the workers to carry out that policy, which leads to some confrontations. It puts a lot of service workers at risk of violence and harassment from people that are, angry at being temporarily inconvenienced by masks. Now, they said that while the SEIU only surveyed a small proportion of the chain's more than 800,000 employees in the U.S., 44% of respondents alone represent about 1,800 employees who say they've been assaulted on the job over masks. That's an insane amount of people. And again, they only surveyed 4,000 people. What if they surveyed 200,000 people? I wonder if that 44% would hold up. I don't know. Even if it's a quarter, you could have 50,000 people that have been assaulted for, asking others to wear masks. And so the numbers, again, what I just said was not entirely scientific, but nonetheless, could you imagine? That'd be a lot of people assaulted for asking others to wear masks. It's insane that we have 1,800 people that have been assaulted for this. And of course, you can see it reflected in videos where people are refusing to wear their masks. They verbally harass and sometimes, again, physically assault workers that are just doing their jobs. It's not like they have a choice. One McDonald's worker who was assaulted at work is Maria Resendiz, who visited the hospital in late June after being grabbed and hit by an anti-mask customer through a drive-through window in Oakland, California. In Illinois, Maria Villasenor recently filed a complaint with the Chicago Department of Public Health after seeing a McDonald's coworker attacked by a customer that she had asked to wear a mask. Now, she told Business Insider, quote, "Throughout this pandemic, McDonald's has failed to protect us from COVID-19. Now it's asking us to police a culture war that's not in our job description and that we're not paid to do." That's very important. She's got a great point. Mask, look, as much as, we can lament this, right? And I do all the time. Masks are a culture war issue now. I mean, it's insane that they are, but they are. Wearing a mask is now seen by many as a tacit approval or disapproval of Donald Trump himself. How did we get to this point? I mean, it's a cult of personality. And here's the thing, right? There's probably a decent chunk of Trump supporters that still wear their masks. And there are many young people who would be considered to be liberal, Democrats, whatever, or just non-politically affiliated, non-interested in politics, that don't wear their masks. So that's interesting, right? And so really it's a small, tiny fraction of people who buy into the conspiracies that masks are like some sort of nefarious deep state effort to control you. I mean, it's insane, right? This is misinformation that is spread by the right wing conspiracy groups. They spread it online using memes, and just, and also just like the aversion to being temporarily inconvenienced comes from the right wing. And that's who's spreading this disinformation. But it's a workers' right issue now. Not only in McDonald's, and not only are McDonald's workers and other fast food and grocery store workers being attacked, right? I mean, you have people, everybody who's an essential worker has had to deal with this at least once or twice. They're put at risk of the nature of their jobs, not only being attacked, but also just being exposed. All while many of them in the lower income spectrums do not have insurance to their jobs and still get paid minimum wage. There's no hazard pay here. These workers have been abandoned. They make less than people getting the $600 unemployment benefit. Now, of course, the solution here isn't to take away that $600. No, but to ensure that essential workers get paid at least a living wage. Now, McDonald's, of course, pushed back on this. And here's them in a statement to Business Insider. They said that it was disappointing to see the SEIU stirring up media attention yet again with inaccurate characterizations, which do not represent what is happening in our 14,000 restaurants across the country. This survey represents just 0.5% of the more than 800,000 crew and managers within our McDonald's family working across your U.S. restaurants. While the SEIU is spending time sharing misinformation, McDonald's and our 2,000 franchisees are focused on keeping crew and managers employed in safe environments to serve healthcare workers, first responders, and communities during this pandemic. Wow, that is a lot of nothing. A lot of bullshit corporate speak that doesn't even address the complaint. It was, hey, there's a lot of people that are being assaulted at work for, basically enforcing the rules that you have handed down. How are you going to fix that? How are you going to help us? And the answer was, the problem doesn't exist. Fake news. How dare you spread misinformation? It's real. Just because the survey size is fairly small, right? It doesn't mean it's not happening, that it doesn't exist. And maybe you should do something about it. It's not like the mask requirements are sure to go away soon. I mean, we're over 3 million coronavirus cases across the country, and there's no sign, it shows no sign of stopping. If you're going to be in business, this is a reality that you're going to have to deal with. And you better figure out a way to deal with it, because you cannot leave these workers to fend for themselves. I mean, look, it's only going to take one viral encounter of a McDonald's worker being assaulted and then testing positive for COVID-19 and possibly dying to put the company in the hot seat. Do you really want to deal with that, McDonald's? You want to deal with the fallout? You want to deal with being boycotted and canceled? If you don't, maybe you ought to help your workers. I mean, God forbid, right? All right. One more story here. Former Ohio Governor John Kasich has been asked to speak at the Democratic convention. According to The Hill, they said it's unclear if Kasich will explicitly endorse the presumptive Democratic nominee when he speaks at the convention, but the expected remarks would amount to a major show of support for Biden by a lifelong Republican who rose to political prominence amid the Tea Party movement a decade ago. Because nothing says Democratic Party by being endorsed by Republicans. Literally. The plans, of course, were first reported on Monday by the Associated Press. Kasich, who unsuccessfully ran for the Republican presidential nomination in 2016, has been fiercely critical of President Trump, going so far as to call for his impeachment last year. So understand, the Democratic Party, in doing this, is rehabilitating the worst Republicans, but they're doing so just because they're anti-Trump. And I know some of you might be like, wait a minute. The worst? What are you calling John Kasich the worst? No, that's too much. I remember John Kasich back from 2016. He's a reasonable Republican. What are you talking about? He's a reasonable, moderate Republican, and he doesn't like Trump. What are you complaining about, lefties? God. I mean, after all, Bernie wasn't a Democrat, and you guys liked him. What is wrong with you? What's wrong with Kasich? Well, let me tell you what's wrong with John Kasich. His policy positions. I know for all the nice talking and moderate sounding language, John Kasich is still an abhorrent Republican because he supports abhorrent policies. For example, right, cutting Planned Parenthood funding in Ohio. He also, and that's part of his spending cuts, by the way, which led to, of course, things getting defunded. Again, Planned Parenthood, but you also have school systems being defunded, roads, bridges, things like that, infrastructure spending that they were unable to do. Things are falling apart. You also had tax cuts for businesses, corporations. But there was also his record on unions, or I should say his fight against labor. Senate Bill 5. Senate Bill 5 went after collective bargaining rights in the same way that Governor Scott Walker's bill also went after labor rights. Now, Kasich got this passed and signed into law, but it had proven to be so unpopular that, such an assault against workers and workers' rights that it was voted down in a ballot referendum that same year. So they didn't lay down and accept it like they did in Wisconsin. Now, John Kasich also went after LGBT rights and abortion rights very heavily. Kasich, for example, had opposed same-sex marriage and authorized the fight to protect Ohio's same-sex marriage ban. Oh, I thought being a Democrat, I thought being a liberal or being moderate would be to accept same-sex marriage. Well, not anymore, apparently. And so, what about reproductive rights? Apparently not for the Democrats. Kasich also signed restrictive abortion bills that led to the closure of half of Ohio's abortion clinics. He also privatized prisons, set up a taxpayer-funded corporate slush fund that he claimed would spark job creation, but actually had little to no oversight. That's who John Kasich is. John Kasich, look, just because the man's not a gibbering lunatic like Donald Trump does not mean that he's a good person, does not mean that he's a member of the resistance. But here's the problem with the Democratic Party. They keep inviting people like this to be part of the resistance against Donald Trump. Again, they hold a lot of the same policy positions as Donald Trump, these Republicans. But for some reason, since they're anti-Trump, the Democrats are like, ooh, come on over. Welcome to the part. Welcome to the resistance. I mean, you've got Rick Wilson, one of the biggest war hawks, led us into Iraq, which was an absolute debacle and a disaster. Same thing with George W. Bush and Bill Kristol and George Conway. Oh, by the way, these are all members of the Lincoln Project, except for George W. Bush, right? Who was still painting somewhere. These guys, again, engineered one of the biggest military debacles in history, in American history. I mean, aside from, I guess, Vietnam, right? But they would have been on the side of it. I mean, these guys, they're not good people. They're not good people. They're disasters. They're terrible people. The deaths of thousands of civilians is on their hands. Massively right wing. And yet, the Democratic Party would rather rehabilitate these guys in their public image, right? They'd rather do that than reach out to the left with more than just empty promises and token reforms. The Democratic Party is basically right wing now. It's being taken over, not by the left, but by conservatives. These are the voters that the establishment wants. They want, and again, this is what they tried to go for in 2016 and failed, not because they were, too left wing or not right wing enough. No, it's because if you, put up a Republican versus Republican light, they're going to choose the Republican. The Democratic Party still does not understand that very simple lesson. And it's because they don't want to actually understand that lesson. These are the people, again, these right wingers, these suburban Republican voters. They don't like how uncivil Donald Trump is. And they don't want socialism in America, even though we actually do have socialism. And by the way, at the end of the day, they're still probably going to vote Republican. Remember, Donald Trump has an 86% approval rating by the Republican Party. It actually used to be in the 90s before the coronavirus pandemic. And he seen some of that base disappear, turn on him. But 86% of the party there is still on his side. That is massive. Massive. You think those people are going to vote for Joe Biden? As conservative as Joe Biden is? Again, if you get a Republican light versus a Republican, they're going to vote for the Republican. Now, the good news is that it might not be in enough numbers to have Donald Trump win re-election. But that said, we're still stuck with right wing. And again, that's a disaster because look, left-leaning policies championed by people like Bernie Sanders, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ro Khanna, Pramila Jayapal, others, right? They're not only dismissed, but mocked by the establishment, despite holding massive appeal with Democratic voters. I think the lesson here is let's not go to the right. And this to me feels like another bend to the right to rehabilitate another terrible Republican politician simply for the fact that he's anti-Trump and to eventually legitimize a further rightward shift once Biden gets into power. And that's scary. But hey, in Biden's defense, Corn Pop was a pretty bad dude. All right. You guys, that's all I got time for, and that's all I got for you today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Please consider, supporting the channel by, subscribing. That's the first thing. So please subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to continue to help independent progressive media, either share this video, share these streams, or become a patron, or become a channel member, or do all of those things, which, again, we're always glad for your help. All right, guys. Thank you. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. See you guys later.
Tighten up by me. Please clap.
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
Tolerate.
Mike Pounds.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.